Welcome to another deep dive. We're going to be exploring some really fascinating ideas about the future,
Oh, yeah.
and maybe even some unsettling ones.
Mm.
We're going to be looking at this intersection of AI and nanotechnology
Oh,
and
yeah.
what it all could mean for us.
Yeah.
The source material that we're going to be using for this deep dive is an audio file
Good one.
called AI Self-Replicating Smart Dust and Nanotech Bots Are Us All.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
It is. It is.
Yeah,
Are you ready to jump in?
I am. It sounds like it's going to be dense packed with ideas.
Oh, yeah.
So I think we're going to find some real gems for the listeners today.
Awesome. One of the first things that really caught my attention was this idea of smart dust.
Okay.
Like these tiny, almost invisible sensors everywhere,
Yeah.
gathering information and reacting to people.
Yeah,
Sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie.
it does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But the audio source we're looking at really pushes that boundary between science fiction and reality.
Right.
They even mentioned Dr. Chris Bolster, and he talks about how these little motes
Mm-hmm.
are going to be evolving and shrinking
Okay.
from, the size of like a grain of rice
Right.
down to like sub-millimeter scales,
So they're going to be basically invisible.
basically invisible.
Yeah. So then what are the real world implications of something like that? Like what would a city full of smart dust even look like?
Well, you have to imagine these little sensors
Yeah.
embedded in everything,
Huh.
buildings, streets, parks.
Mm.
You know, They could monitor the structural integrity of a bridge, for example,
Wow.
alerting city officials to potential problems before they even become dangerous.
So it could actually make the city safer.
Potentially, yeah.
Interesting.
Or imagine you're walking through a park and the environment sort of personalizes to your preferences,
Like how?
like the lighting adjusts.
Oh, wow.
Maybe some benches subtly shift to give you the best view.
That's pretty incredible.
It is, yeah.
So we're talking about like a hyper-responsive environment, then
No.
constantly adapting to our needs and preferences.
That's the idea.
But doesn't that raise some concerns about privacy? I mean, how much data would these motes be collecting on us?
Well, that's the trade-off, isn't it?
Yeah,
You get this highly personalized environment,
right.
but it might mean sacrificing some degree of privacy.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine those same sensors recognizing individuals,
Okay.
tracking their movements,
Uh-huh.
maybe even predicting their behavior.
That's a little unnerving.
It's both fascinating and unnerving at the same time.
Definitely unnerving.
Yeah.
And it goes beyond just smart environments.
Right.
The source also talks about merging technology with our own biology.
Okay.
Through these brain-computer interfaces,
Mhm.
they actually claim that researchers have already connected brain cells to computer chips.
Yeah.
And the results are kind of mind-blowing.
They are. They say that human brain cells seem almost genetically programmed to interact with computers.
Wow.
That's a direct quote.
Yeah.
And when I first heard that, I have to admit I was a little skeptical. But then they went on to describe these experiments where thoughts in the form of electrical signals
Okay.
were shared between animals.
Hold on. Wait, are you saying they actually demonstrated thought transfer? Like one animal literally experiencing another animal's thoughts?
That's what they claim.
Wow.
They specifically described this one experiment where rats were able to communicate their thirst to another rat
Okay.
in a separate location, just through those electrical signals.
That's incredible.
It is.
We should probably be cautious about drawing conclusions from animal studies.
Oh, of course.
Okay.
Always good to be cautious.
But even if we take it with a grain of salt, the implications are huge.
Oh, they are.
I mean, if we can already transfer basic thoughts between animals, what happens when this technology is applied to humans?
Yeah.
I mean, could we one day communicate telepathically?
It's possible.
Or download skills directly into our brains, like in the Matrix?
That's where things get really interesting
Mm.
and potentially very dangerous.
Yeah, because imagine the potential for good. Oh, absolutely.
Like treating neurological disorders
Right.
or even enhancing learning abilities.
Mhm.
Like imagine a world where people can truly understand each other's thoughts and feelings.
Right, a more empathetic world.
Yeah.
It's an incredible idea.
It is.
But on the flip side, you have the potential for manipulation and control.
Right. Like if our thoughts can be accessed or influenced by external devices,
Yeah.
what happens to our free will?
Exactly. If we're no longer in complete control of our own thoughts, are we truly free?
That's a really good question.
It's a question philosophers have been grappling with for centuries.
Right.
And now technology is bringing it to the forefront of our reality.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the source doesn't shy away from those darker possibilities either.
Not at all.
They introduced this chilling concept of nano cameras
Uh-huh.
implanted in people's eyes.
Yeah.
And these cameras could potentially allow someone to see not just what you're looking at,
Right.
but even your thoughts and memories.
It's a disturbing idea.
It is.
Yeah. They even call the people monitoring these cameras control panel stalkers.
I know. It's like a nightmare scenario straight out of Black Mirror.
It is, but this isn't science fiction.
Right.
We're talking about real technologies.
Or at least potential technologies.
Right,
Yeah.
that are being discussed in our source material.
It's what makes this deep dive so compelling and so important.
Mm-hmm.
You know, these are real issues that we need to start thinking about now before they become our reality.
This is definitely getting me to think differently about the future.
Good.
The source material then takes an even deeper dive,
Okay.
and it starts discussing how these technologies might not just be external,
Right.
but actually operating within our own cells.
They talk about how nanomachines or molecular machines
Okay.
already function within our bodies,
Like what?
like ribosomes.
Okay.
Those tiny molecular factories that build proteins within our cells,
Uh-huh.
or kinesins, these little molecular motors that transport cargo around within our cells.
So they're saying that our bodies are already full of these tiny machines.
We are.
You're doing all these amazing things.
It's amazing.
But how does that tie into this whole conversation about AI and control?
Well, the source suggests that these nanomachines,
Mm-hmm.
including ones that might be introduced into our bodies through various means,
Okay.
could potentially be controlled or activated
Wow.
through external signals.
So you're saying someone could actually manipulate our biology
Potentially, yes.
at such a fundamental level?
Scary thought.
That's pretty terrifying.
Yeah.
And they specifically mention electromagnetic signals as a possible way to control these nanomachines.
Right. It is complex, but it's rooted in existing science.
Okay.
I mean, we know that electromagnetic fields can impact biological systems.
Okay.
Think about how pacemakers use electrical impulses to regulate the heart.
Right.
Well, the source is suggesting that metallic salts being released into the atmosphere
Uh-huh.
are increasing conductivity and making it easier to manipulate these nanomachines remotely.
Okay, so now we're not just talking about potential manipulation at an individual level,
No.
but at like a societal level.
Right.
This is starting to feel like we've wandered into some conspiracy theory territory.
It's true that some of these claims push the boundaries of what we currently understand.
Yeah.
And we always need to be cautious about, attributing malicious intent to everything we don't fully understand.
Right.
But it does raise some legitimate questions
Yeah.
about who controls these technologies,
Yeah.
what their motivations are,
Right.
and what safeguards are in place to prevent their misuse.
Those are definitely questions worth asking, and we're just scratching the surface here.
We are.
But I think it's time for a break.
Okay.
We'll be back soon to continue unhacking these complex issues.
Sounds good.
Stay with us. Okay, so we've been talking about smart dust
Right.
and merging biology and technology and the potential for things to get really strange. But now I'm kind of curious, like, what about some actual examples of this stuff happening now?
Well, it's interesting you should mention that.
Yeah.
Because the source material we're looking at actually dives into a specific example that really caught my attention.
Okay.
They discuss the Stanford Research Institute,
Okay.
SRI,
Okay.
and their alleged involvement in research that,
Okay.
let's just say, pushes the boundaries
Okay.
of what most people consider acceptable.
Well, so this is where they get into the whole mind control thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's hard to tell what's real and what's just speculation.
Yeah.
But they actually cite this book
Okay.
by Alex Constantine
Okay.
on psychic spying,
Okay.
which claims that SRI was involved in some pretty wild experiments.
Like what?
Well, they even mention a story about Dr. Sam Kozlov,
Okay.
who was the Secretary of the Navy at the time,
Uh-huh.
being surprised
Okay.
by SRI's work
Okay.
on ELF waves.
ELF waves.
Yeah, extremely low frequency waves.
Okay.
And their potential for mind control.
That sounds like something straight out of a spy movie.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But if this research was happening back in the 70s,
Yeah.
why wouldn't we know more about it by now?
Yeah, it seems like it'd be hard to keep something like that secret for so long.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
But remember, we're dealing with claims from a single source here.
Okay.
It's possible that some of this information is exaggerated or
Right.
taken out of context.
Okay.
But I think what's important
Yeah.
is that it prompts us to think critically
Okay.
about the potential for abuse
Right.
when it comes to these powerful technologies.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
Even if some of the specifics are questionable,
Right.
the underlying message is still really important.
Absolutely.
We need to be aware of the potential for these technologies to be used in ways that we might not agree with.
Exactly. And that brings us to another fascinating claim from the source.
Okay.
The idea that even everyday devices,
Like what?
like computer monitors and TVs,
Right.
could be used
For what?
for manipulating the nervous system.
Wait, seriously? Like my TV's trying to control my mind.
Well, they cite a U.S. patent from 2001
Okay.
that describes the possibility of manipulating brain waves
Okay.
through pulsed electromagnetic fields
Okay.
emitted from monitors.
Really?
It's a pretty wild idea,
That's kind of freaky.
especially considering how ubiquitous screens are these days.
Yeah, they're everywhere.
We're constantly surrounded by them.
Okay, but is there any evidence that this is actually happening? It seems like a huge leap
Right.
from a patent
Mm-hmm.
to actually using monitors to control people.
That's where things get tricky. We're
Uh,
talking about a realm where hard evidence is scarce
right.
and where speculation often fills the void.
Okay.
It's possible that some of these ideas are more theoretical
Okay.
than practical,
Okay.
but I think even the possibility, like, however remote,
Yeah.
should give us pause.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Even if it's not happening now, it could happen in the future.
Right.
And we need to start thinking about these ethical implications now
Now.
before it's too late.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We need to be asking ourselves tough questions
Okay.
about what kind of future we want to create.
Yeah.
Do we want a future
Yeah.
where our thoughts and behaviors can be subtly influenced
Okay.
by the technologies that we use every day?
Right.
Or do we want a future where individual autonomy
Yeah.
and freedom of thought are paramount?
Those are really big questions.
They are.
It feels like we've gone from sci-fi to like philosophy pretty quickly here.
That's the nature of this topic, isn't it?
Yeah.
It forces us to confront some really fundamental questions
Right.
about what it means to be human
Yeah.
in a world that's increasingly shaped by technology.
And the source material definitely doesn't shy away from those big questions.
No, it doesn't.
They even suggest that there might be people out there,
Yeah.
phase 2 subjects, who have already been implanted with these nanocameras
Uh-huh.
and are being controlled,
Yeah.
both subconsciously and consciously.
It's a scary thought.
They even throw around the term world domination strategy.
I know. It's pretty intense.
It is intense.
It is.
And it's easy to get caught up in the fear and paranoia
Right.
that these kinds of claims can evoke.
Is.
But it's important to remember that we're dealing with a single source here,
Yeah.
and their perspective might be influenced by their own biases and beliefs.
It's possible.
So how do we even separate fact from fiction? How do we even begin to make sense of all this?
Well, I think the key is critical thinking.
Okay.
We need to evaluate the evidence carefully,
Okay.
consider alternative explanations,
Okay.
and be willing to question our own assumptions.
And it's like we can't just blindly accept everything we hear, even
Mhm.
if it comes from a source that seems credible.
Exactly. We need to be discerning consumers of information,
Yeah.
especially in a world where misinformation and disinformation are rampant.
Right. It's like we need to develop our own internal BS detector
Exactly.
to filter through all the noise.
Yeah.
But how do we do that? Where do we even start?
Well, one important step is to diversify our sources of information.
Okay.
Don't rely on a single source for your understanding of these complex issues.
Okay.
Read widely,
Uh-huh.
listen to different perspectives,
Okay.
and be open to challenging your own beliefs.
So the more perspectives we expose ourselves to,
Yeah,
the better equipped we'll be to form our own informed opinions.
precisely. And remember, critical thinking isn't about being cynical or dismissive.
Okay.
It's about being curious,
Okay.
skeptical,
Uh-huh.
and open-minded.
Okay.
It's about seeking truth even when it's uncomfortable
Yeah.
or challenging.
Okay. I think I'm starting to see how this all fits together.
Good.
We need to be informed.
Yes.
We need to think critically.
Yes.
And we need to be willing to challenge our own assumptions.
Exactly. And most importantly, we need to remember that we're not powerless. In the face of these technological advancements,
Okay.
we have agency,
Mm-hmm.
we have a voice,
Okay.
and we can choose to shape the future we want to live in.
That's a great reminder.
Yeah.
So where do we go from here?
Right.
What are some practical steps that we can take
Okay.
to make sure these technologies are used for good
Right.
and not for control and manipulation?
Well, for starters, we can support organizations that are working to promote responsible innovation
Okay.
and safeguard human rights
Okay.
in the face of these technological advancements.
Like, Are there specific groups that are working on this stuff?
Absolutely. There are many organizations, both big and small,
Okay.
that are dedicated to ensure that technology is used ethically
Okay.
and responsibly.
Okay.
Some focus on specific technologies like AI or nanotechnology,
Okay.
while others take a broader approach,
Okay.
advocating for things like digital rights and privacy.
Okay. That's good to know.
Yeah.
So what else can we do besides supporting these organizations?
Well, another important step is to engage in constructive dialogue with policymakers.
Okay.
We need to urge them to develop regulations and safeguards
Okay.
that protect individual rights
Right.
and prevent the misuse of these technologies.
All right.
We need to make sure that our voices are heard in the halls of power.
It's like we can't just leave it up to the experts
Yeah.
or the politicians to figure this out.
Exactly.
We need to be actively involved
We do
in
it.
shaping the future that we want.
Absolutely. And it sounds like there's a lot we can do even as individuals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm feeling a lot more empowered now,
Good.
even after all this heavy stuff that we've been discussing. It's like knowledge is power.
It is.
And by understanding these issues,
Yeah.
we can start to take back control.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
The future is not preordained.
Okay.
It's something that we create
Mm-hmm.
through our choices and actions.
Okay.
And by choosing to be informed,
Yes.
engaged,
Uh-huh.
and hopeful, we can help steer humanity towards a more just and equitable future.
This has been an incredible deep dive so far.
It has.
We've covered a lot of ground
We
from, the potential of smart dust
Right.
to the shadowy world of mind control research.
That's fascinating stuff.
It is. And now we're starting to explore what we can do
Right.
to make sure that these technologies are used for good.
Yeah,
This has been a fascinating journey,
it has.
and I'm glad we've been able to share it with you.
Me too.
But we're not done yet.
No.
In the final part of this deep dive,
Right.
we'll delve even deeper into the potential solutions
Mm.
and strategies for navigating this complex
Yeah.
and uncertain future.
Definitely.
Stay tuned. Welcome back to the show. It feels like this deep dive has taken us from excitement about the future to some pretty dark places.
Yeah, it can be a bit of a roller coaster ride.
It can.
Yeah.
But I'm really hoping that we can finish on a note of empowerment here.
I think that's a great goal. And honestly, I think it's the only responsible way to approach a topic like this.
Yeah.
We've explored some unsettling possibilities,
We have.
but dwelling on fear isn't going to help us navigate the future.
Right. So where do we even start? The audio that we've been talking about,
Yeah.
the AI self-replicating smart dust file
Right.
doesn't really offer much in the way of solutions.
Hmm.
They seem to think it might be too late.
Yeah.
Some kind of world domination is already underway.
That's a valid point.
Yeah.
And it's easy to feel powerless
It is.
when you're confronted with claims like that.
It is.
But I think that kind of fatalism is exactly what we need to guard against.
Okay. Yeah.
If we believe it's too late,
Yeah.
then we give up any chance of influencing the future.
Right. Giving up isn't helpful.
No,
But it feels like such a massive problem.
it does.
This whole convergence of powerful technologies
Right.
and potential misuse.
Hmm.
What can any one person really do?
That's where I think the source material, while alarming,
Okay.
actually gives us a clue.
Yeah.
They keep mentioning things like
Yeah.
control panels
Mm-hmm.
and strategies.
Right.
And that implies that there's a human element to all of this.
Right.
Not just like runaway technology.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So if humans are making decisions about how these technologies are developed and used,
Right.
then other humans can push back,
Absolutely.
demand better choices,
Yeah.
and even create alternatives.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It might sound simple, but it starts with awareness.
Okay.
The more people understand the potential benefits and risks of AI, nanotech, all these emerging fields,
Yeah.
the less likely we are to just blindly accept whatever's put in front of us.
Okay, so awareness is step one.
Yeah.
But what does that even look like in practice?
Right.
How do you become aware of something as complex as, say, the potential for nanobots to be controlled remotely? That's not exactly dinner table conversation.
True, but it doesn't have to be overwhelming.
Okay.
Remember, we're going for empowerment here,
Right.
not paralysis by analysis.
Okay.
So start by being curious.
Okay.
If something in this deep dive piqued your interest, dig a little deeper.
Yeah.
There are amazing resources online, documentaries, even podcasts like ours
Mm-hmm.
that are trying to break down these complex topics.
I like that, following your curiosity as a starting point.
Yeah.
It's less intimidating
Yes.
than feeling like you have to become an expert overnight.
Absolutely. And as you learn more,
Yeah.
share what you find interesting with others.
Okay.
Start those dinner table conversations.
Okay.
The more we talk about these issues,
Right.
the more they enter the public consciousness.
Yeah.
And that's where real change can begin.
So from personal curiosity to public discourse.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about concrete actions? Like, is there anything individuals can do
Sure.
beyond just talking about it?
Absolutely. There are organizations doing incredible work in this space, pushing for ethical development of AI, advocating for digital rights,
Okay.
raising awareness about the potential downsides of unchecked technological advancement, supporting those groups, even with a small donation, or volunteering your time,
Okay.
can have a real impact.
It makes it feel less like a David versus Goliath situation.
It does.
Knowing that there are these groups out there already fighting the good fight.
Absolutely. And don't underestimate the power of your own choices as a consumer.
Okay.
Every time you choose a product, a service,
Uh-huh.
even how you spend your time online,
Okay.
you're sending a signal about what kind of future you want to support.
So it's about being mindful, not just about the big picture,
Yeah,
but about all the little decisions that we make every day.
exactly. Ask yourself, does this company prioritize my privacy? Are they transparent about how they use my data?
Okay.
Are they contributing to a world that I want to live in?
Yeah.
Those choices matter.
I'm starting to get a sense of how this all fits together. It's
Awesome.
about being informed. Yeah.
Being vocal
Yes.
and making conscious choices that align with your values.
Exactly. It's about taking back control in a world that can feel increasingly overwhelming
Right.
and out of our hands.
This deep dive has been a real journey.
It has been.
We've covered a lot of ground,
Yeah,
explored some dark possibilities,
we did.
but ultimately I think we've landed in a hopeful place.
I agree. The future is not fixed.
Yeah.
It's a tapestry woven from countless individual threads.
Okay.
And each one of us contributes to that tapestry with every choice we make.
So as we wrap up this exploration of AI, nanotechnology, and the potential for both incredible progress and unprecedented control,
Right.
what's the one message you want our listeners to take away?
Be informed, be engaged, and choose hope. The future is ours to create.
That's a great message.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it's given you some food for thought and perhaps even inspired you to take action. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep choosing a future that reflects your values.